help my son, George.
A lot of people asking for help for a man named George Bailey.
George Bailey.
What are they wearing now?
You will spend that hour getting acquainted with George Bailey. Clarence, you do a good job with George Bailey, and you'll get your wings.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Oh.
Where'd it go? Jane, get me!
George saved his brother's life. George Bailey.
I like George Bailey.
You know, George?
George Bailey is dancing right over that crack. And I've got the key.
Upstairs.
I want the board to know that George gave up his trip to Europe to help straighten things out here these past few months.
But what happened to George?
George got 4 years older, waiting for Harry to come back and take over the building and loan.
George. That's all Harry ever talked.
It's George Bailey, Mother. Friend of yours here, George Bailey. Well, just a minute. I'll call him George.
He doesn't. George.
But one of these days, this bright young man's going to be asking George Bailey for a job.
But George Bailey is not the common, ordinary yokel. George, I'll start you out at $20,000 a year. George Bailey, whose ship has just come in.
George Bailey, lassos, stork.
Now you've probably already guessed that George never leaves Bedford Falls. Night after night, George came back late from the office.
Yes, but George.
George, 4F on account of his ear, George fought the Battle of Bedford Falls.
Of course, Actor George would have gotten 2 of these medals if he had come.
Yes. After all, Potter, some people like George had to stay at home.
Merry Christmas, George.
George, what's wrong?
Wrong, everything's wrong. You call this a happy family. Why do we have to have all these...
What have you been doing, George? Playing the market with the company's money?
No, sir.
I jumped in to save George. Your lip's bleeding, George. Your lips stop bleeding too, George. I told you, George, I'm your guardian angel.
Yeah.
You've been given a great gift, George.
George who?
To my big brother, George.